Oh yes, less than 30 seconds of listening to the beginning of this. What I'm saying is my analysis of Truman is much Australian from my point of view, unless I introduce God into the picture from the very foundation and the start. And by God I mean in the sense of what I take the Jesus story to be. And then I have a perspective that's much more in keeping with an appreciative understanding of the Truman story. He was a true man in the sense of he's faced with difficulties and he solved it in his way. And I trust that this is very much part of what God was doing in his life and in the world, on the world scene too, the consequence of such. An incredible blessing in some sense. I mean, not just in recognizing Israel. I'm not even sure if that was the best thing to do. I mean, wouldn't a better outcome have been, I just suggest, to have simply said, well, no, we can't protect Israel in that situation. It'll cost us another war and great in harmony with the Arabs, and yes, the Russians will use it, etc., etc., and that's not the way to go. All Israel has a free green card. You can live in the United States permanently. And then a tenth of the money we'd have spent on armaments for you and protecting you, and war to protect you against your enemies, we can allocate to introducing you to American society and protecting you in it. If necessary, we'll create a couple of cities. You've only got something like 3 or 4 million people, possibly it's only not even that, 1 million people at that point, actually in Israel. And the Jewish population are incredible benefit from our point of view. Technologically there, and culturally in some sense they're very adaptable. We've got many Jews here anyway. You know, I mean, New York's a Jewish city, becoming, and it is now anyway. More Jews there than there were in Jerusalem, in Israel. And probably was even then, because, you know, the Jews were still scattered in their camps. So we could have simply found conceivably a better solution. We bring God into the issue and suddenly our eyes are open to other avenues and the problem can melt away. And I don't suppose for one moment really that Truman was doing that. I don't know anything about his faith and beliefs, but they're not seen to exist from a world point of view, of course, that's studying his situation. You know, he may have had quite deep spiritual motives, not ostensibly religious, but ethically perhaps quite acceptable in some ways, or in harmony with what we think of as good and right. So I think I approached it a bit like discussion group I was in last night. It's very hard to keep your mind on, but I know the answer to all this problem from a Jesus point of view. And they don't. And I can't just bang that answer into this discussion because that's not where they are. It's alien to them. I may as well sit quietly, really. And I did after my first foray, and was sat on by the chair lady of the group, you know, and that was, in a sense, quite right. Shut up, Marshall, you're not in your right place here. in a sense. You're okay if you keep quiet. We can live with that. But we don't want your solution. There may be exceptions there in the audience, but I can't reach them because that's not the structure of the discussion and the context in which I find myself there. So it said, I pray not for the world, but for those whom thou hast given me. I've not come to change the world. Only to speak to those that have ears to hear. Not to force it on the rest. That is madness, Marshall. So, equally in my analysis of history of, say, Truman, fascinating case. And yes, I can think, well, what would I have done in the situation? And suddenly it becomes much clearer. I wouldn't necessarily even done what Truman did that was right, because there's a greater right, in my view, from my values point of view, and such seem to be as I see it, from what I've gleaned or harvested, or been blessed with, so to speak, from the Jesus story. Very simplistically, anyone could do it. Isn't that lovely? Well, I find it lovely anyway. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.